Yung topic natin for today is yung problem of the origin of life. So ito yung sixth topic natin for our series entitled Has Science Buried God? Yung current series natin, syempre, it aims to give clarity sa issues related sa discourse on science and religion. And last meeting, we were able to show na ang design ang best explanation for the complexities na makikita natin sa different life forms. We also corrected the notion that makes it seem na si God ay indifferent and hindi nag-care. We showed na God is a God who cares, and we see this ultimately sa love na show ni God by Christ dying for us while we were still sinners. Today, we will talk about the problem of the origin of life. So we heavily relied sa work ni Dr. Michael Behe. So we will not discuss ngayon yung 4H format, but we will expand lang further today sa concept na irreducible complexity. So if you remember, may different evidence kaming shinare na scientific evidence that makes it seem na yung evolution is not the best explanation for the complexity of life. So yung isa doon is irreducible complexity. So basically, i-expand natin ito para mas maintindihan natin bakit if this is true, yung macroevolution is not a good explanation for the complexity of life. Let me define yung term pala. So basically, ibig sabihin ng irreducible complexity, if yung system irreducibly complex, ibig sabihin, well-matched yung composition niya, yung bawat parts ay nag-contribute sa basic function ng system in such a way na if you remove one part, one of the parts nun ay hindi na mag-function yung buong system. So kailangan lahat ng parts present siya. So sa Origin of Species, yung challenge ni Darwin regarding his theory, so I'll read yung quote, sabi, if it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down, end quote. Ayun. Next slide. So, nung time ni Darwin, they see na yung cell as a black box, which is a mysterious little part ng life na hindi natin alam kung ano yung nasa loob. Pero ngayon kasi may ability na tayo to look inside the cell, and ang life sa molecular level ay sobrang complicated. Yung assumption kasi nila ng mga scientists, as you go parang sa mas maliit na mga organisms, parang pasimple siya ng pasimple. And syempre, in light of this, if we say na totoo yung irreducible complexity, then ibig sabihin may mapapakita tayo na isang complex na biological system na hindi formed by slight modifications. So, contrary siya doon sa sinabi ni Darwin. So, if ma-demonstrate natin ito, then Darwin himself said na ang theory niya ay mag-breakdown. Ayun. Yung assertion niya kasi dapat mapakita yung isang biological system, unti-unti siyang nag-improve, may mga bagong organs, ganyan, or organisms na na-form from very simple, mas nagiging complex. So, kailangan natin makapakita at least ng some systems na super, complex, na pag may isang part na wala doon, hindi siya magfa-function. And what we will do now, syempre, mag-share ako about some areas where we will see irreducible complexity. Next slide. So, we will talk about 4 things which are mga examples ng irreducible complexity. Yung cilium, flagellum, the cell, and yung blood clotting. So yan yung 4 things na pag-uusapan natin ngayon, which I will argue na example siya ng irreducible complexity. So dun muna tayo sa cilium na part. Yan. So yung cilia, whip-like na hairs sa surface ng cells. So kung ang isang cell ay stationary, ang cilia ay nag-move ng fluid across sa surface ng cell. For example, we have cilia lining sa ating respiratory tract. Ang bawat cell ay mayroong 200 na cilia. Sabay sila nag-move para matanggal sa katawan natin ng mucus. Ganun ang way ng katawan to expel ang mga maliliit na foreign particles na we accidentally inhale. Pero ang cilia ay may ibang function din. Kasi if gumagalaw naman ang isang cell ay nag-grow ang cilia through a fluid. Isang example nito ay ang sperm cell where they propel forward by the rowing action ng cilia. So ang objection na pwede natin ma-receive dito ay masyado raw itong simple na biological system. So parang it exactly proves yung ina-assert daw ng mga evolutionists. And based on, we can respond na ang mga scientists used to think na simple ito when they examined ang cilia under a light microscope. Mukha lang kasi itong maliit na buhok. Pero ngayon, meron na kasi tayong electron microscope and we have found out na complicated molecular machines pala ang cilia. Karamihan kasi ng buhok ay hindi nag-beat back and forth. And ang nag-enable sa cilia to be able to do this is dahil made up pala ito ng 200 na protein parts. So makita natin sobrang daming parts pala that makes it move. Next slide. So to further show yung complexity, I'll read a quote from Dr. Behe about cilium. So sabi niya, quote, "There are 9 pairs of microtubules which are long, thin, flexible rods which encircle 2 single microtubules. The outer microtubules are connected to each other by what are called nexin linkers, and each microtubule has a motor protein called denane. The motor protein attaches to one microtubule and has an arm that reaches over, grabs the other one, and pushes it down. So the 2 rods start to slide lengthwise with respect to each other. As they start to slide, the nexin linkers, which were originally like loose rope, get stretched and become taut. As the denane pushes farther and farther, it starts to bend the apparatus. Then it pushes the other way and bends it back. That's how you get the rowing motion of the cilium. That doesn't begin to do justice to the complexity of the cilium. But my point is that these 3 parts, the rods, linkers, and motors, are necessary to convert a sliding motion into a bending motion so the cilium can move. If it weren't for the linkers, everything would fall apart when the sliding motion began. If it weren't for the motor protein, it wouldn't move at all. If it weren't for the rods, there would be nothing to move. So like the mousetrap, the cilium is irreducibly complex." End quote. So here's a slide natin. Makita nyo yung microtubules dyan, yung green na circles. So may 9 pairs siya, yung pabilog. Tapos merong isang pair sa gitna. Napapalibutan siya ng mga green. Tapos yung motor protein, yung denines, yun yung makita nyo yung orange and blue na colors, malapit dun sa microtubules. Ayun. Tapos yung red na linya, yung makikita nyong pa-circle, na nagdidikit dun sa pabilog na mga green, yun yung nexin linkers. So yung bawat part na ito, may specific function siya. So yung motor protein, kailangan siya para yung sliding motion, ma-convert as a bending motion para to help yung cilium na mag-move. Yung linkers naman, siya yung nag-hold together sa lahat para habang gumagalaw yung cilium, hindi siya mag-fall apart. Tapos yung microtubule, syempre kailangan para may bagay na magalaw. Kasi kung wala yun, wala silang ginagalaw. So, ang argument here is essential lahat ng part na ito para gumana yung system. So basically, irreducibly complex siya. Next slide. Another objection, syempre na makuha natin here, they will ask us why Darwinian evolution cannot account for that, yung sa complexity ng cilium. Ang answer natin here is that we can only get the motion of the cilium when we have all the parts. Wala sa individual parts can do it by themselves. Kailangan natin na lahat ng yun nakakabit. Ang kailangan para ma-account ito ng evolution is if we can imagine how this could develop gradually, pero wala pang nakademonstrate nito. So at least yun yung kailangan nila to show na mas likely or probable na macroevolution yung nag-cause. I-show lang nila how sa process ng slight modifications, unti-unti, nagkaroon bigla ng ganong system sa cilium. To add, syempre, I'll read an exchange between Lee Strobel and Michael B. He's a case for the creator. So, ito yung sabi, quote, maybe these three components were being used for other purposes in the cell and eventually came together for this new function, I said. For instance, microtubules look a bit like girders. Maybe they were used in the structure of primitive cells. Or maybe they formed the cellular highways which the motor proteins moved material within the cell. Behe didn't look impressed. A motor protein that has been transporting cargo along a cellular highway might not have the strength necessary to push two microtubules relative to each other. He replied, an exine linker would have to be exactly the right size before it was useful at all. Creating the cilium inside the cell would be counterproductive. It would need to extend from the cell. The necessary components would have to come together at the right place at the right time, even assuming they were all pre-existing in the cell. Ayun, so hindi lang mismo yung parts, parang pinakita pa further yung complexity na kailangan yung bawat parts at the right place at the right time. And kung hindi, hindi siya mag-work. Next slide. Another objection naman na pwede natin makuha. Siyempre, possible ba na nabuo ito lahat by chance? So, ito yung sabi ni Michael B. on it. So, I'll read yung quote. Sabi niya, it's extraordinarily improbable. Let me illustrate it for you. Say there are 10,000 proteins in a cell. Now imagine you live in a town of 10,000 people and everyone goes to the county fair at the same time. Just for fun, everyone is wearing blindfold and is not allowed to speak. There are two people named Lee, and your job is to link hands with them. What are the odds that you could go grab two people at random and create a link of Lees? Pretty slim. In fact, it gets worse. In the cell, the mutation rate is extremely low. In our analogy, that would mean you could only change partners at the county fair one time a year. So you link with two other people, sorry, they're not the other Lees. Next year, you link with two other people, sorry, no Lees again. How long would it take you to link with the other Lees? A very, very long time, and the same is true in the cell. It would take an enormous amount of time, a prohibitive amount of time even, to get three proteins together. Ayun, so maliban sa sobrang complex niya, pinapakita kong dito na sobrang improbable if by chance man. Kasi syempre, makikita mo parang ready-made na siya eh. Tapos syempre, ilang cilium yung kailangan mo. Parang marami din. Yun yung one example, yung cilium. Next naman, next slide, we will talk naman about the flagellum. Ito, super na mind blown din ako dito nung naaral ko siya. Sa flagellum, we can think of an outboard na motor sa isang boat. Yung sa likod na, parang may motor sa likod yung boat na nagpapaandar. Ayun. So, yun yung idea basically para maisip natin how flagellum works. Pero mas extraordinary kasi yung flagellum. Yung propeller kasi nito ay long at parang latigo. So, made siya of a protein called as flagellin. So, naka-attach ito sa drive shaft. And makita niyo yung drive shaft dyan sa slide. Naka-attach siya sa drive shaft by the hook protein na nag-act as a universal joint. So, ito yung nag-aalaw sa propeller and drive shaft na mag-rotate freely. And several types ng proteins ay nag-act as bushing na nag-allow sa drive shaft na mag-penetrate sa bacterial wall at mag-attach sa rotary motor. Ang energy naman nito ay nakuha nito sa pag-flow ng acid sa bacterial membrane. Ito ay isang complex na process na in-aral pa rin ng mga scientists para maintindihan nila. So, yung whole system, it works really well, pero hindi pa rin super clear how everything works. So, yung spin ng propeller ng flagellum nito, na ito yung super mind-blown ako, kaya niya mag-spin ng 10,000 revolutions per minute. So, kung i-compare siya sa mga nagawa ng tao, mas mataas yung revolutions niya per minute compared sa high performance na sports car. Pero maliban dito, yung propeller niya kaya mag-stop mag-spin within a quarter turn and instantly kaya niya mag-spin sa other side na 10,000 revolutions per minute din. So, grabe yung function na kaya niya gawin. And si Howard Berg, professor ng physics, and professor din siya ng molecular and cellular biology sa Harvard University. Sabi niya ang flagellum ang pinaka-efficient na motor sa universe. It's way beyond anything we can make, and considering its size ay a couple of microns. So yung micron is 1/20,000 ng isang inch. So most ng length nito ay yung propeller niya. Yung motor niya mismo ay 1/100,000 ng isang inch. Ganun siya kaliit. So even sa current na technological advancement natin, hindi natin kaya gumawa ng anything close to it. And sobrang complex niya na pag may mawalang isang part, hindi raw siya gagana. Hindi totally gagana. Hindi siya yung parang mag-slow down lang na 5,000 revolutions per minute. Pero talagang hindi siya gagana. So, ganun daw siya. Next slide. Let's talk naman about the cell. Ito medyo close to home karamihan sa atin kasi tinuro ng high school. And so, maliban sa cilium and sa bacterial flagellum, we can see sa microscopic world ng cell na dinedefine ito si Darwin. So example, yung intracellular na transport system. Ang eukaryotic cells, so cells siya ng lahat ng organisms except sa bacteria. Ang mga cells na ito ay mayroong compartments na parang mga rooms sa loob ng house. Meron itong nucleus kung saan nag-reside ang DNA. Merong mitochondria kung saan ay majority ng energy ng cell ay produced. May endoplasmic reticulum na nag-process ng proteins, may Golgi apparatus na station for proteins na need ma-transport elsewhere. Ang lysosome ay ang garbage disposal unit. May secretory vesicles na nag-store ng cargo bago dalhin palabas ng cell. At merong peroxisome na nag-help na mag-metabolize ng fats. So yung bawat compartment ng cell ay sealed off by a membrane tulad ng isang room na may walls and a door. So, yung mitochondria naman niya, may 4 siya na separate sections. And if we count everything, ay more than 20 different, more than 20 different sections in each cell. Ang cells, constantly siya na nagtatanggal ng old stuff and nag-manufacture ng mga bagong components. At ang mga components na ito ay designed to work in one room, pero hindi sa iba. So, karamihan ng mga bagong components, gawa siya sa ribosomes. So, yung ribosomes, naman siya, collection ng 50 na large molecules na mayroong more than 1 million na atoms. So, automated siya na factory. Kaya niya mag-synthesize ng kahit anong protein na instructed na like pag may ipapagawa yung DNA doon, kaya gawin ng ribosome kahit basta kailangan lang ng tama na genetic information. Kahit another ribosome kaya niya gumawa. So ganun siya ka-complex na biological machine. So si Dr. Michael Denton, isang agnostic na medical doctor and PhD sa biochemistry, nag-marvel siya. So ito yung sabi niya, I'll read the quote. It is astonishing to think that this remarkable piece of machinery, which possesses the ultimate capacity to construct every living thing that has ever existed on Earth, from a giant redwood, so yung redwood, siya, super laki na puno, giant na tree, tas umaabot ng 500 to 1,000, even 2,000 years old. Tapos from giant redwood to the human brain, can construct all its own components in a matter of minutes and is of the order of several thousand million times smaller than the smallest piece of functional machinery ever constructed by man. So, sobrang liit niya, pero ang dami niyang kaya gawin. So mas maliit pa siya sa functional machinery na nagawa natin na kaya gumawa ng anything. So, and ayun. So maliban sa pagiging amazing ng ribosome, may challenge rin for people to get the new components sa tama na rooms kung saan ito mag-operate. And para magawa ito ay we need another complicated system. The same way na when a bus will take a person from one place to another. So yung si Michael Behe, yung in-explain niya to further, yung picture na painted niya to show yung complexity is that una, we need to have molecular trucks na enclosed, tapos may motors daw na naka-attach doon. Kailangan din natin daw ng maliliit na highways where the trucks could travel. Need din ma-identify kung anong mga components ang dapat makapasok sa loob ng truck. Hindi kasi pwede nakukuha lang ng whatever protein na makita. Kasi yung bawat specific protein, may specific room daw sila kung saan sila dapat pumunta sa cell. Kailangan din daw ng signal na naka-attach sa protein. So ito ay parang ticket para makapunta ang protein sa tamang molecular truck. So yung truck ay dapat alam din kung saan siya pupunta, which means na dapat may signal din sa truck at may complementary signal din kung saan i-unload ng truck yung mga cargo. Tapos maliban doon, kapag yung truck naka-arrive na kung saan siya dapat pumunta, need pa ng way para makaalis ang cargo palabas ng truck papunta sa compartment. So active process daw ito kung saan ay yung other components, they recognize each other. Kung saan ay physical, nag-open yung mga bagay-bagay to allow material na to go inside or pumasok doon. So dapat lahat ng components daw na ito ay in place, and if yung isa ay hindi in place, hindi gagana yung kabuuan ng system. Parang chaotic siya, hindi parang mafulfill yung purpose na gusto mangyari ng isang cell. And dahil dito, ito yung reason kaya napasabi si Michael Behe. So ito yung quote, sabi niya, "Now, does this microscopic transportation system sound like something that's self-assembled by gradual modifications over the years? I don't see how it could have been. To me, it has all the earmarks of being designed." End quote. Ayun, so yung complexity ng cell, kailangan present lahat ng yun. Tapos if may isa doon na wala or hindi nagfa-function well, hindi na raw siya gagana. And that's why for him, part rin siya ng irreducible complexity. Ayun. And next slide, lastly, yung blood clotting. Ayun. So regarding blood clotting, if hindi nag-clot daw sa right place with the right amount, yung blood mo at the right time, we would bled to death. So yung system ng blood clotting ay nag-involve daw ng highly choreographed na cascade ng 10 steps na gumagamit ng about 20 na magkakaiba na molecular components. So kung wala ang buong system na ito ay hindi gagana ang blood clotting system. So what makes this system complex ay hindi merely yung paggawa ng clot, kasi yung clot naman blob lang daw siya na nag-block sa flow ng blood. Pero ito daw yung buong regulation ng system. So if kaya kasi makagawa ng clot sa mali na lugar, kunyari mapunta sa brain or sa lung yung clot, then mamamatay tayo. If ang clot naman ay magawa after ma-drain lahat ng blood, then syempre we will die. And if ang clot ay hindi na-cover ang buong length ng cut sa atin, mamamatay din tayo kasi mag-continue pa rin yung bleeding. So kailangan, para magkaroon ng perfectly balanced na blood clotting system, so yung clusters ng protein components ay dapat daw inserted all at once. So this rules out yung gradual na Darwinian approach. And nag-fit siya sa hypothesis ng intelligent designer better. Kasi if Darwinian approach siya, dapat sa blood clotting system meron din siyang parang paunti-unting improvement hanggang sa parang naging perfect na lang yung system niya. So ngayon, we just finished yung demonstrating yung irreducible complexity or sa pag-expound by giving for examples. So example na binigay natin yung cilium, flagellum, the cell, and blood clotting. And in light of this, syempre, it truly begs the question, if iisipin kasi natin ang argument ng mga nag-propagate ng Darwinian evolution ay ang mga complex organ systems ay product daw ng mga slight modifications. And syempre, if this is false, then we can say na life is irreducibly complex. And this creates a problem to the naturalists kasi if kailangan buo na agad lahat ng parts ng isang biological system in order to function, then saan nang galing ang biological system na ito? Paano ito nabuo? Ayun. So, ulitin ko, if kailangan na buo na lahat ng parts ng isang biological system in order to function, then saan ito nanggaling? Paano ito nabuo? So ito yung question kanina na yung sa title ng talk natin, The Problem of the Origin of Life. Ito yung reason bakit siya problem. Problem siya kasi kailangan buo na eh. Complex na siya kaagad. Kailangan kompleto na para gumana. So saan siya nanggaling? So yun. And one possible answer na binibigay ng mga evolutionists ay this happened by chance. And ipapakita ko to bakit siya problematic by sharing 2 quotes. So next slide. So yung quotes na ito galing sa English astronomer na si Sir Fred Hoyle. So atheist siya, hindi siya sympathetic sa Christianity. Pero ito yung comments niya about life happening by chance. So ito yung unang quote. The likelihood of the formation of life from inanimate matter is 1 to a number with 40,000 knots after it. It is big enough to bury Darwin and the whole theory of evolution. There was no primeval soup, neither on this planet nor any other. And if the beginnings were not random, they must therefore have been the product of purposeful intelligence. End quote. Tas next slide. Ito pa yung probability na binigay niya, yung analogy. The chance that higher life forms might have emerged in this way is comparable with the chance that a tornado sweeping through a junkyard might assemble a Boeing 747 from the materials therein. End quote. Kaya ako syempre, in light of the quotes na it shows na highly improbable for life to come from non-life. And dahil nakita natin yung irreducibly complex na biological system kanina, at least yung 4, I would say na yung best na nag-account dito is if my supremely intelligent na designer that made biological systems to be this way. So in summary, we discussed further kung ano bang irreducible complexity, and we showed biological systems na meron to disprove yung Darwin's theory of evolution based on his own standard. We showed na this is highly improbable na mag-spring out dahil sa chance, which made us conclude na this is a product ng isang supremely intelligent na designer. So tapos ng discussion and we can now proceed sa Q&A.